Clara woke up to the soft morning light streaming through her small window. The room smelled faintly of fresh bread from the bakery downstairs and the crisp air of early autumn. She pulled the thin blanket closer around her shoulders and stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her arms from years of labor. Life in this small town was quiet and simple, which suited her. She liked the calm, the routine, the ordinary rhythm of things. But some days, ordinary could feel cruel. She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite long-sleeved blouse, not because it was fashionable, but because it hid her scars. Not that she was ashamed, exactly. Shame wasn't the right word. Her scars told stories, stories of survival, of battles fought, of pain endured. They were marks of a life she had lived fully, even if most people would never understand it. Still, she had learned early that most people preferred to see a smooth, perfect exterior. Imperfections, especially visible ones, invited whispers, snickers, and sometimes outright cruelty. Clara stepped out of her modest home, locking the door behind her. She greeted the neighbor briefly, a cheerful man with a dog that barked more than it should. The town was waking up, the streets slowly filling with people going about their day. She moved with quiet grace, carrying a small bag filled with groceries, her steps measured, unhurried. She had errands to do, pick up vegetables, drop a letter at the post office, and maybe stop at the library to return a book she had read for the third time. As she passed the corner cafe, a group of young women sitting outside glanced her way. Their eyes lingered a moment too long, not in curiosity, but in judgment. Clara felt the familiar tension tighten in her chest. She ignored them, pretending not to notice. She had learned to move through the world like this, to keep her head down and avoid confrontation. But it wasn't always easy. The air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, and Clara, feeling the heat, rolled up her sleeves. She didn't think much of it, it was just practical. But the moment her arms were fully exposed, a hush seemed to fall over the street. The young women gasped softly, leaning closer to whisper among themselves. Their words weren't quiet enough. "Look at those, what happened to her?" one murmured, trying to hide her laughter behind a hand. She's covered in scars." "Why would anyone have so many?" another added, her voice tinged with disbelief and amusement. Clara's heart sank slightly, though she kept walking. She had been mocked before, of course, but hearing it so openly, so publicly, never quite stopped hurting. Each laugh, each snide remark, was like a small needle pricking the pride she carried carefully inside. She told herself it didn't matter, that their ignorance couldn't touch her truth. But still, a part of her wished she could vanish, just for a moment, to escape the piercing eyes and whispered judgments. She remembered the first time someone had mocked her for her scars. She had been in high school, timid and unsure, standing in a crowded hallway when a boy pointed and laughed. He called her names she had never heard before, words meant to cut and wound. Back then, she had cried in secret, hiding behind a book until the bell rang. Over time, she had learned to hide the marks, to cover them with long sleeves, scarves, and jackets. And though the laughter had faded, it never fully left her memory. Clara reached the corner where the market was located. The smell of fresh vegetables and fruit mixed with the aroma of baked bread made her stomach rumble. She moved along the stalls, selecting tomatoes, carrots, and a few apples for herself. The market women greeted her warmly, exchanging small talk about the weather and the coming harvest. She smiled politely, keeping her mind focused on the shopping list rather than the whispers that followed her like shadows. As she reached for a bunch of carrots, one of the young women from the cafe approached. "Hey," she said, voice dripping with curiosity and mockery. "Are those real?" She gestured toward Clara's exposed arms. What happened? Were you in a fight? Or did something else happen?" The words were sharper than they should have been, full of assumptions and judgment. Clara looked at her calmly, her brown eyes steady. "They're just scars," she said softly, with no anger, no plea for understanding. Nothing to worry about. She continued selecting her vegetables, letting the conversation fade into the background noise of the market. The young woman stared for a moment longer, clearly expecting some reaction, but Clara remained composed. That composure, Clara knew, was her armor, her silent protest against the world that often misunderstood her. Despite the judgment, she continued her walk through the town, passing by the small park where children played and older men sat on benches, reading newspapers and exchanging stories. She noticed their eyes on her briefly, some curious, some respectful, some indifferent. None of them laughed. In moments like these, Clara felt a small measure of relief. Not everyone in the world was cruel, she reminded herself. Some people simply didn't notice. That was enough for now. By the time Clara reached the post office, the morning had grown warmer, and the sun shone brightly on the cobblestone streets. She dropped off her letter and waited quietly for her turn, observing the people around her. There was a man with a cane, carefully navigating the steps, and a young mother holding her child close. Life was simple here, predictable, safe. Yet even in this small town, people could be unkind. People could laugh at scars they didn't understand. And Clara, despite everything, carried those scars with quiet dignity, as if each one whispered a secret of strength to anyone willing to listen. Her errands done, she started her walk back home. The town seemed different now, brighter perhaps, though the mocking words from the cafe lingered in her mind. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the sun on her face and the breeze ruffling her hair. Each step she took was measured, deliberate. She moved through the world like this every day, unassuming, gentle, yet carrying a story that few would ever understand. Clara knew that one day, someone would see beyond the scars. Someone would recognize the strength behind the quiet eyes, the courage that had been tested in ways most could never imagine. Until that day came, she would continue to walk through the small town, her head held high, her scars visible to those who wished to see, hidden to those who only sought to judge. And though the laughter and whispers stung, Clara understood something important: the world could mock her body, but it could never touch the spirit within. That spirit, calm yet unyielding, carried her forward, guiding her steps through streets filled with ignorance and curiosity alike. And somewhere deep inside, a small flame of hope burned, waiting for the day when her true story would be recognized not for the scars, but for the strength they represented. Clara returned home carrying her small bag of groceries, the warmth of the morning sun fading behind the clouds. She stepped inside, setting the vegetables carefully on the kitchen counter, and took a moment to breathe. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock. The silence was comforting, a small bubble of peace after the world outside, where whispers and laughter seemed to follow her like shadows. She unpacked the groceries slowly, arranging the fruits and vegetables with care. Cooking was one of the few things that made her feel completely herself. It didn't matter what the world thought about her scars or her quiet life, in the kitchen, she was in control. The simple motions of slicing carrots and peeling apples calmed her, and she felt a small smile tug at the corner of her lips. As she worked, Clara's mind wandered to the upcoming week. She had joined a local volunteer program a few months ago, teaching basic first aid and emergency skills to young adults in the community. It was a quiet program, nothing flashy, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She wasn't seeking attention or admiration, she just wanted to help, to give back in some small way. Her scars, which so many people saw as flaws, were in fact reminders of why she cared so deeply about helping others. Later that afternoon, Clara packed her bag for the volunteer session. She wore her simple uniform, a light blue shirt with her name embroidered on the chest and dark pants. She had chosen this outfit carefully. It was professional, neat, and comfortable. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror and adjusted her sleeves, making sure they weren't too tight or revealing. Even here, in a room full of people who genuinely wanted to learn, Clara still felt the old pull of caution. She didn't want to give anyone a reason to laugh or stare. The streets were quieter now as she walked to the community center. A few people waved as she passed, familiar faces who had known her for years. They didn't judge or whisper, they simply acknowledged her presence with gentle smiles. That small kindness warmed her heart. She realized that not everyone in the world was cruel, that even in a town where gossip and judgment existed, there were always people who saw beyond appearances. When she arrived at the community center, the room was already filling with participants. Most of them were young, eager to learn and listen, but there were a few older adults as well. Clara's instructor, a tall man named Sergeant Hawkins, greeted her warmly. He was a retired veteran, respected in the town for his years of service and for the calm authority he carried with him. He nodded at her, acknowledging her presence without comment, and she felt a small sense of relief. The session began with introductions. Each participant shared their name, their experience, and why they had joined the program. Clara listened quietly, nodding politely. When it was her turn, she spoke softly, telling the group about her background and her interest in helping others. There were a few murmurs of curiosity when her arms became visible as she adjusted her sleeves, but Clara didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that the right response was calmness, not defensiveness. The first part of the training involved basic safety techniques and emergency response scenarios. Clara demonstrated how to perform CPR, how to bandage a wound, and how to assess a person in distress. She moved with precision and confidence, her hands steady and sure. She noticed that some participants were watching her closely, not just for the techniques she was teaching, but for her presence, her demeanor, her quiet authority. During a break, Clara stepped outside to get some fresh air. The cool breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it the scent of nearby trees and blooming flowers. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself relax. A few of the participants followed her out, eager to ask questions about techniques or experiences. Clara answered patiently, explaining every detail with clarity. She found herself smiling more freely now, her earlier tension fading. Teaching was something she loved, and she could feel the connection growing between her and the group. Then Sergeant Hawkins arrived outside, walking slowly with a careful step. He observed the group quietly, his eyes sharp and discerning. He had a presence that commanded respect, not through words but through the sheer weight of experience and authority. Clara felt a slight twinge of nervousness as he approached. He stopped a few feet away, watching as she explained the proper way to secure a bandage on a participant's arm. After a moment, he spoke, his voice calm but carrying the authority of a veteran. "You have a steady hand," he said. "Most people get nervous showing others these techniques. You don't. That's good." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Clara nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement but careful not to let it seem like she craved approval. The session continued with more hands-on exercises. Clara guided participants through lifting techniques, simulated rescues, and proper use of first aid equipment. She moved among them, correcting mistakes gently, encouraging effort and precision. The group was focused, eager, and surprisingly receptive. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt a sense of belonging. Here, she was not judged for her scars or her quiet nature, she was respected for her skills, her knowledge, and her dedication. As the session neared its end, the participants were divided into small teams for a final exercise. Each team had to respond to a simulated emergency, applying everything they had learned. Clara's team included a few younger participants and one older man, quiet and serious, with a noticeable presence about him. They worked together, communicating clearly, following instructions, and assisting each other where needed. Clara felt pride swelling quietly in her chest. The exercise was challenging, but they handled it well. When the session was officially over, Clara helped clean up the equipment and prepare the room for the next group. She moved efficiently, her actions practiced, her mind alert. Sergeant Hawkins watched silently for a moment, then approached her. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. You handled that well, he said simply. Better than most instructors I've seen. Clara felt a warm flush of satisfaction. Praise was rare from him, deliberate and meaningful. She nodded respectfully, not wanting to appear boastful. Just as she was about to leave, Sergeant Hawkins asked her to wait. He stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. I couldn't help noticing your tattoo, he said. Clara froze for a moment, surprised. She had thought her tattoo would go unnoticed, hidden beneath her clothing most of the time. She hesitated, then rolled up her sleeve slightly to reveal a small part of the design, careful but unashamed. The veteran's eyes widened slightly, a rare moment of visible surprise on his face. I didn't expect that, he admitted softly. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable respect in it now. Clara felt her heart beat a little faster. Here was someone who had seen much in his life, someone who carried authority and experience, and yet he had paused, genuinely affected by what he saw. She met his gaze steadily, saying nothing at first. The silence hung between them, charged but not uncomfortable. Then Sergeant Hawkins nodded slowly. That's remarkable, he said. Not just the tattoo, but the story it represents. I can see it in your eyes. You've been through a lot and come out stronger. Clara felt a small smile forming. No laughter, no whispers, no judgment, just acknowledgement, respect, and understanding. As she left the community center that day, Clara felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. For the first time, someone had recognized her courage without being prompted, without the usual curiosity or ridicule. It was a small victory, but it mattered. And deep down, she knew that this encounter was only the beginning of something bigger, something that would challenge her, inspire her, and perhaps even change the way people saw her scars, her strength, and her story. The days after the community center session passed in a blur of routine for Clara. She woke early each morning, prepared a simple breakfast, and made sure her small apartment was neat and orderly before stepping out into the world. Yet, the encounter with Sergeant Hawkins lingered in her mind. She could not forget the way his eyes had widened, the way his voice had softened when he saw her tattoo. It was as if, for a brief moment, he had looked past the ordinary exterior that everyone else seemed to judge and seen the real story beneath her skin. At work, Clara went through her day as usual, helping in the small office where she managed records and assisted clients. Her colleagues were polite, though distant. Some had made comments about her scars in the past, but she had learned to ignore them. Her scars were part of her, reminders of struggles she had survived, and she had no desire to hide them or apologize for them. The thought of Sergeant Hawkins, however, gave her a subtle courage she had not felt before. She stood taller, spoke more confidently, and even smiled more freely. That evening, Clara received a message from one of the younger participants in the volunteer program. It was brief but enthusiastic, thanking her for her guidance and expressing a desire to learn more. Clara replied carefully, encouraging the young person to continue practicing and to remember that even small skills could save lives. As she set her phone down, she thought about the influence she could have, quietly making a difference without fanfare or recognition. It was a comforting thought. The weekend arrived, and Clara decided to return to the community center to prepare materials for the next session. She walked through the quiet streets, enjoying the crisp air and the peaceful rhythm of her steps. She had arrived early, giving herself time to organize first aid kits, arrange chairs, and check the supplies. The routine was familiar and calming, allowing her to focus on practical details rather than the memories that sometimes weighed heavily on her. When the participants arrived, Clara greeted them warmly. There was a new energy in the room, an eagerness to learn that she found both inspiring and reassuring. The training began smoothly, with Clara demonstrating procedures and guiding the group through exercises. She moved confidently among them, adjusting posture here, correcting technique there, always careful to offer encouragement and maintain focus. Her scars, partially visible beneath her rolled-up sleeves, seemed to go unnoticed by most of the group, and for the first time, she did not mind. She felt invisible in the best possible way, present, yet not defined by appearances. Halfway through the session, Sergeant Hawkins arrived again. Clara had expected him to observe silently, as he had before, but this time there was something different in the air. He moved deliberately through the room, his gaze sweeping over the participants before settling briefly on Clara. She felt a familiar tension rise, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. What would he think today? Would he notice anything new, or had the surprise of the tattoo already passed? The veteran approached her after a few minutes, nodding slightly as he acknowledged her presence. "You've been consistent," he said. "Good work." Clara felt a warmth of pride, though she kept her expression neutral, not wanting to seem overly eager for approval. She continued with the exercises, her hands steady, her instructions clear. Yet she could sense that Hawkins' attention was lingering on her more than usual, a subtle intensity that made her pulse quicken. During a break, Clara stepped outside again for fresh air. She leaned against the railing of the small balcony, letting the breeze cool her face. Hawkins appeared shortly after, standing a few feet away. For a moment, they simply observed the quiet street below, neither speaking. Then, in a measured voice, he said, "Your tattoo, it's not just art, is it?" Clara turned to face him fully, her expression calm but curious. "No," she admitted softly. "It's a reminder of what I've survived, of what I've endured." Hawkins nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly as if studying a complex puzzle. "I can tell. Not everyone carries their history so openly, and certainly not everyone handles it as well as you do." His words carried weight, recognition born of experience. Clara felt a quiet satisfaction. For once, she was not being judged for her scars or her tattoo, but rather respected for the story and strength they represented. The afternoon session resumed, and Hawkins remained present, occasionally offering subtle guidance to the participants but leaving Clara in charge. She noticed the group seemed unusually attentive, perhaps influenced by his presence or perhaps by the steady confidence Clara now radiated. The exercises became more challenging, testing the participants' understanding and coordination. Clara moved among them, correcting errors and demonstrating techniques with precision. At one point, she had to show how to carefully lift someone who had fallen, and her movements were smooth, practiced, and efficient. The participants followed her lead, their confidence growing with each successful attempt. Later, as the session wound down, Hawkins approached her again, this time in a quieter corner of the room. "I've seen many people in my career," he said. "Most of them have skill, some have courage, but few have both. You have something rare, both the ability to act and the heart to care. That's not easy to find." Clara felt a lump in her throat. Praise from him was unusual, deliberate, and it struck her deeply. She nodded quietly, letting the words settle in. Hawkins hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "And your tattoo?" His voice softened, almost reflective. "It's powerful. Not just for the design, but for what it represents. I've seen people hide their scars, cover their past, but you've embraced it." Clara felt a shiver of acknowledgement, a recognition that went beyond mere words. The veteran had seen through her quiet exterior, beyond the simplicity of her life, and recognized the resilience that had defined her journey. The participants began to pack up, thanking Clara for her guidance. The atmosphere was warm, filled with smiles and genuine appreciation. Clara assisted in cleaning and organizing, her movements calm and efficient. Hawkins lingered for a moment, observing quietly, then finally nodded at her. "Keep this up," he said. "You're making a difference, more than you realize." Clara smiled softly, a mixture of gratitude and pride. As she walked home later that evening, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange, Clara reflected on the day. The recognition from Hawkins had awakened something within her, a quiet confidence, a reassurance that her scars, her tattoo, and her experiences were not marks of shame but of survival and strength. She realized that she had begun to change, slowly but surely, finding her voice and presence in a world that had often overlooked or ridiculed her. Back in her apartment, she settled into her routine, making a simple dinner and reflecting on the small victories of the day. The encounter with Hawkins lingered in her mind, a gentle reminder that her story mattered, that strength and courage could exist in the quietest of people, and that sometimes, the recognition she sought was not from the world at large, but from someone who truly understood the value of resilience. Clara gazed out the window at the twinkling lights of the town below, feeling a quiet determination. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would always be those who judged, whispered, or laughed. But she had found a small circle of acknowledgement, a place where her skills, her story, and her strength were seen and respected. And for the first time in a long while, she felt not just accepted, but powerful in her quiet way. As night fell, Clara's thoughts drifted back to her tattoo. The design, etched into her skin, carried memories, pain, survival, and strength. It was a map of her journey, a silent testimony to the battles she had fought and the victories she had claimed. And now, seeing the respect in Hawkins' eyes, she understood that her story was more than just a personal journey. It was a testament to what it meant to endure, to rise, and to inspire those around her without even trying. Clara lay down that night with a sense of calm fulfillment. The day had brought recognition, connection, and a quiet acknowledgement of her inner strength. Tomorrow, she would rise again, face the world with her head held high, and continue to make a difference in ways both visible and unseen. The scars on her arms, once sources of shame and laughter, were now symbols of resilience, courage, and an unspoken power that even those who had walked through the harshest of battles could not ignore. And deep inside, Clara felt it, the subtle, steady certainty that her life, her story, and her strength were only beginning to unfold, revealing surprises, recognition, and respect in ways she had never imagined. The next week arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy for Clara. She had noticed subtle changes in the participants' attitudes toward her during the previous sessions, a growing respect and attentiveness that warmed her heart. Even the youngest and shyest members now followed her instructions carefully, asking questions and seeking clarification rather than whispering or laughing behind her back. Clara knew this shift was not just about the exercises, it was about the presence and quiet authority she carried, an authority that seemed to grow stronger with each day. As she arrived at the community center, Clara noticed Sergeant Hawkins already there, speaking with one of the newer participants. His posture was relaxed but purposeful, his eyes scanning the room with a professional, almost protective vigilance. When he saw Clara, he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that carried more weight than simple politeness. It was an unspoken understanding between them now, a mutual recognition of her strength and resilience. Clara returned the nod, feeling a steady calm wash over her. Today's session was designed to challenge the participants in new ways. Clara had prepared a series of complex scenarios that required teamwork, quick thinking, and precise execution. She began by explaining the first exercise, demonstrating the correct techniques while moving carefully among the participants to offer guidance. She noticed Hawkins observing closely, his eyes occasionally flicking to her arms and then back to the group. Clara felt a familiar pulse of tension, not from fear but from anticipation, as if the moment she had been waiting for was slowly approaching. The exercise began, and the participants moved with cautious determination. Clara walked among them, correcting posture, offering encouragement, and demonstrating techniques with clarity. At one point, she noticed one of the younger participants struggling to follow the instructions. Clara knelt beside them, her hands steady and gentle as she guided their movements. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice calm and reassuring. "Focus on what I'm showing you. You can do this." The child nodded, eyes wide with concentration, and slowly but surely completed the task correctly. Clara smiled, a quiet satisfaction spreading through her. As the group progressed through the exercises, Hawkins approached her once again, standing close enough for only her to hear. "You're doing something remarkable here," he said quietly. "These people trust you. That doesn't happen often," not in situations like this. Clara felt a warmth of pride but kept her focus on the participants. I just want them to learn, she replied softly. I want them to understand that even small skills can make a big difference. Hawkins nodded, clearly impressed. The next part of the session required the participants to work in pairs to simulate real-life emergencies. Clara moved from pair to pair, offering corrections and encouragement, ensuring each participant understood the importance of precision and timing. Her calm and confident demeanor seemed to inspire the participants, many of whom had initially been timid or unsure of themselves. She noticed a change in the way they looked at her, not just as an instructor, but as someone who had lived through experiences that gave her insight and authority. During the exercises, Hawkins observed silently, his attention occasionally drawn to the tattoo on Clara's arm. He had seen it before, but now, he noticed something more, an intricacy in the design that suggested a deeper story, a history of resilience and strength. Clara, aware of his attention, did not hide the tattoo. Instead, she carried herself naturally, letting it be a part of her presence without explanation. She wanted her actions to speak louder than any image on her skin, and yet, she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that Hawkins recognized the story it represented. As the pairs completed their exercises, Hawkins finally spoke aloud to the group. Remember, technique is important, but understanding your own limits and your partner's abilities is just as crucial, he said, his voice firm but encouraging. The participants listened intently, nodding in agreement. Clara felt a surge of gratitude. Hawkins' acknowledgement had elevated the session, reinforcing the lessons she had worked so hard to teach. The final exercise was the most challenging. Clara had designed a scenario where the participants had to respond to a simulated injury while navigating obstacles and coordinating as a team. The room was filled with focused energy as the participants moved carefully, applying the techniques Clara had taught them. She observed each movement, correcting errors, offering encouragement, and demonstrating solutions when necessary. Hawkins remained at the back, silently watching, but Clara could feel his presence lending an additional layer of seriousness to the exercise. As the scenario unfolded, one of the participants tripped over an obstacle, twisting their ankle. Clara immediately moved forward, her hands steady and sure as she assisted them. The other participants paused momentarily, watching her with wide eyes, clearly impressed by her speed and confidence. Hawkins' expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and recognition crossing his face. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment to see the depth of her skill and the authenticity of her strength. After the participant was safely assisted, Clara returned to the center of the room, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The group looked to her for guidance, their faces reflecting admiration and respect. She realized in that moment that the laughter, whispers, and judgments of the past no longer mattered. She had earned something far more valuable: genuine respect and recognition for her abilities, for her resilience, and for the person she had become. Hawkins approached her once the exercise concluded, his eyes meeting hers with a seriousness that made her heart beat faster. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, his voice low. "That tattoo, it's not just a design, is it? It represents something significant, something only someone who's lived through real challenges could have." Clara nodded slowly. "It does," she replied. "It's a record of what I've survived, the struggles I've faced, and the lessons I've learned along the way." Hawkins' gaze softened, a hint of awe in his eyes. "I can see that," he said. "And it's clear that those experiences have made you not just strong, but capable of inspiring others. That's rare. Very rare." Clara felt a lump in her throat, a mix of pride and humility. She had never sought recognition for her scars or her tattoo, but hearing these words from someone she respected so deeply gave her a sense of fulfillment she had never known. As the session ended, the participants began packing up, expressing their thanks to Clara for her guidance and patience. Many lingered, asking questions, seeking advice, or simply sharing a smile. Clara felt a quiet joy, knowing that her efforts were making a real difference in their lives. Hawkins remained behind for a moment, observing her interactions with the participants. He finally approached, nodding approvingly. "You've done well today," he said. "More than well, you've set an example that will stay with them for a long time." Clara smiled softly, feeling a warmth of satisfaction. She realized that her journey, her scars, and her tattoo had not been obstacles but sources of strength. They had shaped her into someone capable of guiding others, of teaching resilience, and of earning respect not through words, but through actions. Hawkins' recognition was a validation of her journey, a reminder that true strength often lies beneath the surface, waiting to be seen by those who understand its value. Later, as Clara walked home through the quiet streets, she reflected on the day. The exercises had been challenging, the participants had grown, and Hawkins had acknowledged her in a way that left her feeling both humbled and empowered. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her skills, her experiences, and her presence had the potential to influence many more people. The quiet confidence she carried now was not just for herself, it was a tool she could use to inspire and guide others. Back in her apartment, Clara prepared a simple dinner, her mind still replaying the events of the day. The recognition from Hawkins, the admiration of the participants, and the realization of her own growth created a sense of calm fulfillment. She glanced at her tattoo in the mirror, tracing the intricate lines with her eyes, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was more than a symbol of survival, it was a testament to her journey, her strength, and her ability to impact the lives of others. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara's thoughts wandered to the future. She knew there would be challenges ahead, days of doubt, moments of fear, and people who might try to undermine her confidence. But she also knew that she had proven, both to herself and to others, that she possessed a quiet power, a resilience that could not be ignored. Her scars and tattoo were no longer marks of vulnerability, they were emblems of her strength, a visible reminder of what she had endured and what she could achieve. Clara drifted to sleep with a sense of peace, her heart light yet strong. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to demonstrate the strength that lay within her. And deep down, she understood that the respect she had earned from Hawkins, and from the participants, was not fleeting, it was a recognition of something enduring, something that would continue to shape her path and the lives of those around her. The following week, Clara arrived at the community center with a quiet determination. Today was special, not just another routine session, but a day that would test the limits of what she had been building with her participants. The exercises had been challenging enough, but today, she had prepared something different, a simulation that required not only skill but courage, quick thinking, and trust. Clara could feel the anticipation in the room, the energy almost tangible, as participants chatted nervously among themselves. She smiled softly, knowing that beneath their nerves was excitement, the same excitement she had felt when she had first stepped into a similar situation long ago. Sergeant Hawkins was already there, observing from a corner with his usual calm intensity. Clara noticed the way his eyes lingered on her arms, catching sight of her tattoo for a brief moment before moving back to the group. She had grown accustomed to his attention, but today it seemed heavier, more focused, as if he were trying to measure something beyond just skill or authority. Clara ignored the flutter of nerves in her chest, reminding herself that her abilities and experience spoke louder than any glance or judgment. The session began with warm-up exercises, a simple routine to ensure everyone was alert and ready. Clara moved among the participants, gently correcting posture, giving guidance, and offering encouragement. She noticed their confidence had grown over the past weeks, the shyest ones now moved with purpose, and even the participants who had struggled to keep up were demonstrating noticeable improvement. Clara's heart swelled with pride, not just in her own teaching, but in the resilience and determination of these individuals. Once the warm-up was complete, Clara explained the main exercise. It was a complex scenario that simulated a search and rescue mission. The participants were divided into teams, each responsible for navigating obstacles, providing aid to injured individuals, and communicating effectively under pressure. Clara's voice carried clearly through the room as she detailed the rules and expectations, her authority undeniable yet approachable. She made sure each participant understood their role, and then she stepped back, allowing the exercise to begin. The room buzzed with activity. Participants ran, crawled, and communicated with urgency, applying the techniques Clara had taught them. She moved among the teams, offering guidance, demonstrating solutions, and gently correcting mistakes. The intensity of the simulation mirrored real-life stress, and Clara could see her participants rising to the challenge. Their faces, once uncertain and hesitant, now displayed focus, determination, and teamwork. Clara's chest swelled with quiet satisfaction as she observed their growth. Hawkins' gaze remained on her, but now it seemed different. He was watching not just the participants, but Clara herself, her movements, her interactions, her decisions. At one point, one of the participants hesitated, unsure of how to approach a simulated injured person. Clara moved quickly, kneeling beside them, her hands steady and confident as she demonstrated the proper technique. She spoke calmly, explaining each step. Focus on what you need to do. Take your time, and trust yourself. You can handle this. The participant nodded, absorbing her instructions, and executed the task successfully. Hawkins' eyes widened ever so slightly, and for a moment, Clara felt as though he were seeing her story, the experiences, struggles, and resilience behind the calm exterior. As the exercise continued, a sudden shout echoed through the room. One of the teams had encountered a more challenging obstacle, and confusion had begun to spread. Clara's instincts kicked in immediately. She moved to the front of the group, her voice firm but controlled. Listen to me. Focus, communicate, and work together. You have the skills to handle this. I will guide you, but you must trust yourselves and each other. Her authority was undeniable, and the room quickly settled. The participants looked to her for guidance, following her instructions carefully. In the midst of the chaos, Hawkins approached Clara. His expression was serious, almost unreadable, but there was a tension in his eyes that she had never noticed before. Clara, he said quietly, close enough for only her to hear, I've seen a lot in my time, but I've never seen someone handle a situation like this. You're not just skilled, you're extraordinary. That tattoo of yours. I think I finally understand. It's a mark of someone who has lived through real challenges and come out stronger on the other side. Clara's heart skipped a beat, a mixture of pride, humility, and relief flooding her. She nodded silently, choosing not to elaborate. Her actions had already told her story, and Hawkins' recognition felt like the confirmation she had been waiting for. The simulation reached its climax. Teams moved with precision, overcoming obstacles and assisting their simulated injured participants. Clara observed every movement, offering final instructions and adjustments. The room was filled with intensity, determination, and focus, a testament to the hard work and growth of the participants. As the exercise concluded successfully, the room erupted into applause, not just for the participants, but for Clara as well. Her guidance, patience, and expertise had turned a room of uncertain individuals into a team capable of facing challenges with courage and skill. Hawkins stepped forward, his expression a mixture of admiration and awe. Clara, he began, his voice clear and commanding, you've not only taught these people skills, they've learned resilience, confidence, and the power of teamwork. I want you to know, I recognize the strength and experience that brought you here. That tattoo isn't just ink, it's a story, a mark of someone who has survived, grown, and now inspires others. You are remarkable. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, tears pricking her eyes. She had never sought recognition, but hearing these words from someone she deeply respected made her feel seen in a way she never had before. The participants gathered around, expressing their gratitude, sharing stories of their progress, and acknowledging the lessons they had learned from Clara. Even those who had once doubted her abilities or whispered behind her back now looked at her with admiration and respect. Clara realized that the laughter and judgments of the past no longer mattered. She had earned something far more meaningful: trust, respect, and recognition for the person she had become. As the session ended, Clara and Hawkins stayed behind to clean up and discuss the future of the program. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "Not just skill, but the ability to inspire others, to teach them resilience, and to help them see their own strength. That's rare, Clara. Truly rare." Clara smiled softly, a mixture of humility and pride. "I just want to help them," she replied. "If I can make even a small difference, it's worth it." Hawkins nodded, clearly impressed by her sincerity. Later that evening, Clara walked home through the quiet streets, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The exercises, the training, the guidance, and the challenges, all of it had led to this moment of recognition and fulfillment. She thought of her tattoo, the scars, and the experiences that had shaped her. What once had been marks of vulnerability had become symbols of strength, resilience, and the ability to inspire others. Back in her apartment, Clara prepared a simple meal, her mind replaying the day's events. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her efforts were making a real difference in the lives of others. She glanced at her tattoo in the mirror, tracing the intricate lines with her eyes. Each line, each symbol, was a testament to her journey, proof that she had faced challenges, endured hardships, and emerged stronger. It was more than ink on skin, it was a record of survival, courage, and growth. As night fell, Clara settled into bed, feeling a profound sense of peace. She knew there would be future challenges, days of doubt, and moments of uncertainty. But she also knew that she possessed a strength that could not be denied, a resilience that had been forged through experience and refined through action. Her scars and tattoo were not just reminders of the past, they were emblems of her strength, proof that she could face anything and emerge victorious. The recognition from Hawkins, the respect of the participants, and the affirmation of her own journey created a sense of fulfillment that Clara had never experienced before. She realized that her life, her struggles, and her resilience had value not just to herself, but to the people she guided, inspired, and taught. Her quiet strength had become a beacon for others, showing them that perseverance, courage, and self-belief could overcome any obstacle. As she drifted off to sleep, Clara's thoughts were filled with hope and determination. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she had the tools, the experience, and the inner strength to face them. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of recognition, respect, and fulfillment. The laughter and doubts of the past were gone, replaced by admiration, trust, and the knowledge that she had truly made a difference. Clara's life had changed not because of the tattoo, the scars, or even the recognition from others, but because she had embraced her own strength, learned from her experiences, and used them to inspire those around her. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of resilience. And as she slept, the quiet strength within her continued to grow, ready to face whatever challenges awaited in the days to come.